certain places and want me to hit up. It's a wireless modem. It's quite fast when it's connecting properly.
So it's a cell phone wireless modem.
Kind of.
Worse than cell phone does?
Yeah, but it seems to be much faster than when I use Tree. So maybe Tree would be just as fast on a phone, but it's much faster than what I've experienced with 3G telecom cell on here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let's go Wi-Fi.
All right, guys. It's nearly 6 o'clock. We're keeping a tight schedule tonight. 6 p.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2015, just like every Tuesday here in Bali. We get together and talk about Bitcoin. It's time for Bitcoin Filter. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. Number 44. Wow. I'm looking forward to number 52. That'll mean like we'll have 1 year under our belt. We're getting there. Okay, so great show tonight. We'll start off with a little bit of a local Bitcoins in Bali news. Of course, we'll cover the price like always. And today we've got author and co-founder of CoinAcademy.co, Ric Shreves, to continue our series on altcoins. Today we're going to talk about Dash, which is all about transaction anonymity. So after that, we're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin scalability. This was on the agenda last week, but we didn't get to it. Very, very important topic for Bitcoin. A little bit nerdy, but we'll try and make it fun and interesting. And the topic for today is the war on cash. So lots of sensational headlines. Some people say Bitcoin is a part of the war on cash. Do we need cash? Do we need that dirty wad of money in our pocket? I think maybe we do, but you guys are free to argue with me. Let's go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here with the folks at home. Bear with me just a moment. All right, so everyone at home should be looking at the same thing we're looking at. Bitcoin filter number 44 is underway. Okay, so every week we come to you from the beautiful co-working space, Hubud. You can learn about Hubud at hubud.org. They are kind enough to give us a nice air-conditioned space to meet in, and it's really a great place to work. If you find yourself in Bali on a Tuesday night, I hope you'll come to Hubud and join us in person. If you can't, we also have our conversation online on Facebook. There's a few new faces in the crowd today, so if you're not already a member, I hope you'll join this Bitcoins in Bali public group. Don't be confused, there's also a Bitcoins in Bali community. The Bitcoins in Bali group is an open group where we have our online discussion. People just post interesting stories here, and we talk about it online, and then every Tuesday night we talk about it in person. So post your stories there and join in the conversation. We also have a conversation going on Twitter. You can see I've got a tweet all teed up here with the hashtag Bitcoins in Bali. So I'm going to go ahead and tweet that out to the world. Let everybody know, broadcasting live on Google+. And then if I go to the next tab here, this is Twitter. Hashtag Bitcoins in Bali. If you ever want to get in touch with us or begin a conversation, just get on Twitter and put hashtag Bitcoins in Bali and we will see it. So Twitter or Facebook, you got options. Okay, local news. This past Saturday, we had Bitcoin 101. Yes, we had a full house in the cool conference room here. We had about 10 people show up, and we learned a little bit about Bitcoin, and people brought their laptops and their phones, and we gave them a little bit of Bitcoin to play around with, taught them how to store it safely and also spend it if they like. And then afterward, we went to the Onion Collective for a little bit of lunch. So it was a great day. We do Bitcoin 101 on the second Saturday of every month here at Hubud. So keep your eyes peeled. I'll post the next one shortly. Tonight's a big night. This is why I got started right on time. We've got Pecha Kucha night directly after the festivities here at Hubud. We're going to head over to the Beetle Nut. Some people that that we're used to seeing in the room on Tuesday nights are going to be on stage at the Beetle Nut tonight. Johnny, we're looking forward to the show. Yeah, we will be there as soon as possible. I know you have to leave early to go do your mic check and stuff, right? Okay. All right, let's jump right in with the price. $243.17 per Bitcoin. That's a lot of money per Bitcoin. When I first got started with Bitcoin, it was less than $20 per Bitcoin. So we got an extra decimal place. That's pretty good, and that's pretty good in my book. Of course, if you bought Bitcoins at $1,200, like in the fall of 2013, you might not be as happy about this price. But it's okay. Bitcoin is still working. Bitcoin's still trying to figure out what its price is in the world. Don't forget that that Bitcoin price absorbs about $800,000 worth of value every day because there are new Bitcoins that come into existence. So every day that the price remains steady or even increases, it's absorbing all of that economic value. So something to keep in mind. This is the week-long chart. Over the course of the week, we've seen a high of 247. And it went as low as 237, so we've had a volatility of about 4% over the course of the week. So some people are bothered by that. It's kind of difficult to run a business if your currency is fluctuating by 4%. But Bitcoin is just a baby after all. It's still finding its legs, and that's the long and the short of it. Unfortunately, that's the way things are. There's lots of smart people addressing the volatility, but it's still pretty volatile. All right, we are in Indonesia, so let's take a look at the Indonesian price. This is bitcoin.co.id, and you can see that right here we are just over around 3 million Indonesian rupiah for one Bitcoin. One thing that's interesting is their volume is quite down. In past weeks, I've seen them up 150 and as high as 250 Bitcoins per day. To be below 100, I think, is a little bit of a thin market. I've been watching the Indonesian exchange, and because of the thin market, there's a lag in the price. If you compare the Indonesian price to the global price, there can be a difference of between 3 and 5%. So there's a bit of an arbitrage opportunity if you're into that kind of thing. You can buy on the Indonesian exchange and then sell on Coinbase or Bitstamp and make a few percent. I don't like to get involved in that kind of thing, a little too crazy and well, risky, but some people love it. So anyway, check out bitcoin.co.id if you're interested in buying Bitcoin for Indonesian rupiah. All right, so with that, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Ric Shreves. We're going to talk about Dash, which is another cryptocurrency in the cryptocurrency universe, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I think it's something interesting to take a look at. So take it away, Rick.
You'll flip us over to CoinMarketCap. We're sort of going down the list in CoinMarketCap, picking up the big players. And this is number 4 on the list right now, Dash. A lot of you may know this by its previous name, which was Darkcoin. They rebranded as Dash in late March of this year. This is actually a currency I didn't know a whole lot about until I started digging into it in preparation for the session this week, and I'm actually quite impressed with what they do. The big forte of Dash is anonymity. This is really the first currency we've looked at that is different structurally from Bitcoin in some very, very important ways. One of them is, and primarily, the anonymity. And the way Darkcoin, excuse me, I still want to call it Darkcoin, the way the Dash works is it uses what are called master nodes. And there's a master node on each end of the transaction. And what the master node on the inbound section of the transaction does is it takes a number of inbound payments and lumps them all together into one anonymous transaction, then forwards that to it. And the master node then breaks that apart and distributes it to people on the other end. If you're familiar with the service CoinJoin, CoinJoin is what's called a coin mixer, and it's a way for you to anonymize Bitcoin transactions. Basically, you run through CoinJoin, it drops your Bitcoins into a blender, basically, anonymizes the parts and pieces, and spits out a different Bitcoin at the other end, which gives you some protection from the transaction being traced. With Dash, this is actually built into the system from the get-go. So it's extremely anonymous in the grand scheme of things. Master nodes are actually different Bitcoins as well, and master nodes are involved in confirming the transactions and take almost any reward in a transaction for Dash. Master node owners actually have to possess at least 1,000 Dash coins themselves to be granted a master node license. So they're trying to make sure that everyone who takes the role of a master node provider is actually has a stake in the system. Well, the other area where Dash really different is the mining algorithm. The mining algorithm for Dash is unique, counterintuitive, but it's an efficient algorithm that is used. And the reason for this is very interesting. They wanted to even the playing field for miners. So since it's a little less efficient, it means that GPU miners and CPU miners actually compete at parity. Now with Bitcoin, the algorithm is designed where the GPU miners reap a significant advantage over CPU miners, and very few people are doing CPU mining as a result of that. But with Dash, they've kept the CPU miners in the game, so it helps distribute this mining load a little bit and makes it a little more equitable. The other thing that's interesting about Dash is because it is a less efficient algorithm and it runs at a slower rate, it uses about 30% less energy than Bitcoin mining does, making it cheaper to run mining operations and more attractive for the miners as well. The other thing that's different, and this is about the end of the list here, is the Dash difficulty adjusts every single block. They use a moving average that changes the difficulty for every single block, which again, it makes it a more even playing field for people and eliminates that problem that you see in Bitcoin where the difficulty jacks way up, and so the miners bail out and they go mine another coin. So Dash was designed to do two things, and it's actually been quite successful at them. One, to increase the anonymity of the transactions, and two, to level the playing field and solve some of Bitcoin's mining problems. Quite an interesting coin, worth looking at. It's actually quite young. It was only launched in early 2014. It's actually gone through 2 name changes since then. It started as Xcoin, was very quickly rebranded as Darkcoin, was just rebranded as Dashcoin. The reason for that is because there was so much kickback about, oh, it's all, and the dark coin, and they're being used for illegal transactions. They decided to fight back against that, reposition themselves, and try to come out as a more credible currency. There are a few merchants who are accepting Dash these days. So I would say after Bitcoin and Litecoin, Dash is likely the 3rd most common coin in acceptance by merchants. But again, it's not widely accepted. Dash value peaked at about $13 a coin. Right now it's seen at $2.73 a coin, which is actually higher than the Litecoin per coin value. There will be about 22 million Dash coins at the end of the mining cycle, and the number of Dash coins decreases about 7% each year. It doesn't have the radical halving process that we see with Bitcoin. So it's a bit more predictable. It has some interesting structural differences. And frankly, and this is strictly a personal opinion, don't go out and make investments based on my personal opinion. It looks to me like it has legs.
Very cool.
What's that one there? Ric Shreves? You didn't tell us about that yet, Rick.
Yeah, we're working on that one.
Ric Shreves.
Next week.
So,
also known as the Dickcoin.
Anybody have any comments or questions on this?
Anybody who has 1,000 Dash coins can be a master node. Just to allow,
You have to apply and then through. Well, now the official website. Can we pull that up? We never did switch over to that. Okay. Note the official website. There was a bit of evidently name grabbing going on when it became aware that they were going to become Dashcoin, and there actually is a Dashcoin dot whatever. That's not the official website. The official website is dashpay.io. You go through those guys if you want to set up Masternode. You can download and everything, set it up.
So, but somebody has to allow, which sounds central.
I think it may be a consensus mechanism, but honestly, I didn't dig into that to see what it takes to become a Masternode provider. But the masternode, if you wish to become a masternode provider, again, you pick up 45% of the mining reward. So there is a significant incentive there, though again, at this point in time, you're talking about a $13,000 bill to get in as a masternode owner.
And do you know what is the time of the blocks?
The block time, it's almost instantaneous by the system that they use. It's actually a proprietary mechanism they call Instant X. As they say, inputs are locked to specific transactions and verified by consensus of the masternode network. Conflicting transaction and blocks are rejected. If consensus cannot be reached, validation occurs through standard block confirmation.
It's a proof of work? Or
it's proof of work. That's correct.
So I know that that's a lot of tech behind the scenes, and it's actually fascinating that there's this whole ecosystem of alternative coins that find a problem with Bitcoin and then test their new design in the with all the crypto coin community to see if people will get interested in these new ideas. For me, this was an interesting coin to look at, especially because we're talking about cash later on. This is more trying to approximate cash because, as you know, Bitcoin's anonymity is grossly misunderstood. If you can attach a Bitcoin address with a person, you can actually track a lot of what they do financially. And that actually harms its utility as money. Money is supposed to be fungible, meaning that one unit of the currency is just as good as another unit of the currency. And if you have the ability to track transactions, then you have the ability to create blacklists and say for example, any Bitcoin that was once on the Silk Road, we're not going to accept that now. And if that were to happen and to become in any way popular or enforced, then it would seriously harm the utility of Bitcoin. And so the folks behind Dash created this. So it's not all about ensuring your rights to buy drugs online. It really has something to do with the utility of the coin itself. Now, I didn't know that there was a central authority, or I guess it deserves more investigation if there's a central authority that allows these master nodes to exist. And also, it sounds like they have some sort of proprietary code. Bitcoin is all open source, so those are open questions. Maybe we can continue that conversation online. But good stuff, Rick. Yeah, excellent. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, but what stops me if I want to anonymize Bitcoin? I just buy a Dash, make a transaction, which anonymizes, and then get back Bitcoin. So
you could use CoinJoin for the same purpose.
Yeah, which they charge 2-3%, and this one would be much cheaper.
Well, whenever you get in and out of currency, even between cryptocurrencies, you're going to pay a little percent. So
yeah, but it's much small because it's liquid market. So
yeah.
I think our friends from Bitcoin Code ID, they even have 0%.
Yeah, for all
altcoins.
Right. All right. Okay, let's move along here, guys. Okay, so one of the things we didn't have time for last week was the block size question. What you see up here is I know it looks like Wikipedia, but it's just Wikipedia software running the Bitcoin wiki. And this is the scalability topic. And this has been hotly debated and very well followed and documented for a very long time. And we've actually talked about it on this show in the past. We've got a limit here. Current bottlenecks. Today, the Bitcoin network is restricted to a sustained rate of 7 transactions per second due to the Bitcoin protocol restricting block size to 1 megabyte. So the thing that's on the table right now that some of the core developers are debating, and it's a pretty heated debate, is they want to increase the block size from 1 megabyte to 20 megabytes, right? So that they can do things like compete with Visa, who has, let's assume a rate of 2,000 transactions per second, something like on the order of what Visa does, right? So if Bitcoin is going to be truly a global currency, then we've got to overcome the 7 transactions per second limit. Now, there are some people that argue that you've got the transaction fees, right? And transaction fees will go up if we approach that 7 transaction per second limit, and that the market will sort out and throttle the economics of doing a Bitcoin transaction. So that's an interesting argument, but it's really uncharted territory, right? And the workarounds that attempt to address this scalability problem are also untested, and it looks like we're going to reach the limit sometime around the fall 2016. People are trying to predict, but they're trying to judge based on the trajectory of the transaction volume, but we don't have much time. In fact, people are calling it the last minute. So people's hair are on fire. They're all red-assed about this topic. So I thought we'd take a look at it together. This is Gavin Andreessen. I don't know why he has goggles on. And he is basically the face of Bitcoin development. He's paid by the Bitcoin Foundation, although I'm not sure what the status of that is, the latest status is. But in any case, he spends all day, every day, worrying about Bitcoin and its strategic development from a technical standpoint. And he's basically saying that what is it? We'll run out of transaction. Basically, the transactions per second limit will be hit sometime during the next price bubble, right? So he's got this idea to increase the block size to 20 megabytes, but this is the kind of stuff that shows up in his inbox. Seriously, Gavin, who do you think you are? Stop parading around the globe trying to dupe everyone into accepting this change. Do you seriously think you have the authority to take away my and every other current Bitcoin holder's rightfully deserved privilege of getting a transaction in before others? What makes you think I want or have the means to purchase more storage space and processing power to run my full node? So obviously with a 20 megabyte block size, the blockchain is going to get much, much bigger in a hurry. I think the blockchain is now around 30 gigs, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously it would get much, much bigger very quickly, thus making it difficult for everyday people to run a full Bitcoin node. So
it's a maximum. It's a cap. It's not like every block is suddenly going to become 30 megs.
Right, right. It's they have the option to make their blocks that large. So
some will.
Yeah, some will. And if 10 years from now, if everybody's using Bitcoin, then it would probably approach that on a regular basis. So that's a bit of the background. Now there's people showing up with alternatives to this 20 megabyte block size solution. There are side chains, and lately a lot of people have been talking about this Bitcoin Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is a scheme where transactions take place off the blockchain, and periodically the transactions that take place off the blockchain are reconciled with the blockchain itself. So it has to do with...
How's that different from the sidechain?
I don't know exactly what the technical difference is. It has to do with these payment channels. So there's like this kind of web of trust, or this kind of brokered situation where they where there's a lot of transactions taking place from the same parties. A payment channel is established using this protocol. But to be honest, I don't know all of the technical specifics. I just know that it's one of the schemes being proposed to circumvent this suggestion that they need to increase the block size to 20 megabytes. Now, the thing I highlighted on this page was paper is still a work in progress. And that's significant because we don't have much time. This was a little article written by Mike Hearn, who spent 8 years at Google doing capacity planning for Google Earth and Google Maps. He's got quite a pedigree of capacity planning. And he's basically saying that even if the solutions that are coming forward are perfect, they haven't been vetted and can't be in place in time for this projected time when we run out of room, right? When we start bumping up against that 7 transaction per second limit. So he goes on to say that he's been involved since the very beginning with Bitcoin. He actually corresponded with Satoshi Nakamoto, and he cites an email exchange with Satoshi where Satoshi says a higher limit can be phased in once we have actual use closer to the limit and make sure it's all working. Eventually, when we have client-only implementations, which is where we are now, I don't have the whole blockchain on my phone, right? Eventually, when we have client-only implementations, the blockchain size won't matter as much. Until then, while all users still have to download the entire blockchain to start, it's nice if we can keep it down to a reasonable size. So if you're one of those people one of those purists that goes back to Satoshi Nakamoto and what he said, he's saying go ahead and increase the block size. So this is a very readable article. It's a little bit nerdy, but if you want to get into it a little bit, there's also politics and he said, she said stuff. It can appeal to you on that level as well. But he's saying that any suggestions we have in place, we won't be able to get up and running in time, so we've got to increase the block size. This stuff about the Lightning Network though was posted in the group, so I wanted to make sure we addressed it. And there's some more links. I'll leave these in the show notes for the sake of discussion. But this is all from Gavin Andreessen. He's got basically he's got to make this decision publicly and justify all of his decisions. Bitcoin is a democracy. Come on in, guys. Bitcoin is a true democracy. If Gavin suggests a change and all of the folks that run Bitcoin nodes decide they don't like that change, they can not adopt the new software. So he's really got to make the case in public. And well, there are tens of thousands of computers all over the world that run the Bitcoin software, right? So he's actually got to convince quite a few people. And there's actually a possibility of what's called a hard fork. So he could introduce this change. Maybe 20–30% of the Bitcoin nodes might adopt the change, but another segment might not. Thus, you'd have what's called a hard fork, which we don't really know what will happen sociologically. There will be two versions of reality. The reality for the people that are running the new Bitcoin software and the reality for the people that are running the old Bitcoin software. It would probably be a bad thing.
I thought it would break. I thought that was the point. I thought all of the people that hadn't upgraded would kind of fail to connect or be part of this larger community. Can they still?
Yeah, they can still participate in and amongst themselves, and the new group that will be backward compatible, so they can probably communicate with the entire network. But the old nodes would probably reject the transactions submitted by the new nodes.
So theoretically, they could continue to. Would they still be? Would the 7 transactions per second then be kind of? What I'm trying to find out is the first group who didn't upgrade. Would they kind of be working within their own
These are essentially 2 different points now.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, you'd have two different coins. Yes, that technical limitation would still be there for the folks that didn't upgrade, but yeah, they might choose to go that direction. Yeah, we shall see. It's never dull, right? Okay, so I'll put these in the show notes so you can read a little bit more yourself. Okay, so let's get on to the topic for tonight's discussion. I hope you guys will participate. I found this really fascinating thing to research. There's lots and lots of instances where there's a war on cash. Now, as I did my research, I kind of found that it's actually 2 topics, right? There's the war on cash, as in cash that you walk around with, keep in your pocket, use to perform transactions anonymously. And then there's the cash that is not necessarily what you have in your pocket, but it's cash meaning it's not invested, right? So if you've got your savings account or your checking account and you've got a balance of $1,000, there's also a war on that cash because interest rates have been held at near zero since 2008, since the global financial crisis. So if you can imagine that the entire planet has foregone because these interest rates have been held artificially low, there's a war on savers or a war on cash in that regard. And the stories that I'm highlighting here will touch on both of those things. So let's get on with it. First topic, or first article, I should say, cash is king, but not in this part of the world. what's this part of the world? They're talking about Asia. They're talking about Hong Kong and Taiwan and Singapore, where they've got mass adoption of credit cards and near-field communication payment mechanisms. There's lots of technology adoption in this part of the world. Now, here in Indonesia, we're not, I guess we're not in that boat because it's very much a cash society. You basically need cash if you're going to walk around Ubud in Bali. You got to go get some beautiful pink notes that are worth about $8 US a piece, and that's how you can go to a restaurant or pay your taxi driver or rent a scooter. But it's interesting that our neighbors, our political neighbors in Indonesia, the Taiwans and Singapores of the world, are very familiar with a non-cash world, and Singapore is an especially interesting case because it's a very regimented society and lots of rules in Singapore. And cash, you could make an argument that cash allows people to circumvent the rules. I mean, if you're going to buy drugs or something, or you're going to buy some pornography or whatever you want to, if you want to have a surveillance-free monetary transaction, cash is the way to go. And so you can see why governments might be interested in taking the cash option away. And there's lots of places that are going quietly, basically saying it's okay to move off of the cash-based system. I know people in the States that are in this boat as well, where they hardly ever touch cash. They just use their credit cards, and they like to track their own transactions. A lot of credit cards make it very easy for you to see what you spent on everything during the month. But I think it's not a secret that lots of other people are watching those transactions as well. So there's no real privacy. So let's move on to the next one. Denmark moves step closer to being a cashless country. Denmark is also, on board with getting rid of cash. And there's lots of practical reasons to do it. I mean, there's certain things about cash that I don't like. I mean, it's kind of hard to get change, and then if you do, you're walking around with a bunch of change in your pocket. It's dirty. It's got germs on it. If you're going to another country, you can't really change your coins. So I've got coins from. It can get stolen. It can get stolen. That's right. Yeah. If somebody holds me up at gunpoint and takes my phone, my bitcoins are safe, but my cash not so much. So that's Denmark. I'll put that one in the show notes. You've also got big banks saying that it might be time to abolish cash. And why would a bank say this? Well, it's kind of interesting. The big banks around the world, especially the central banks, are moving into negative interest rate territory. Right? We've been near zero since 2008, and this is done as a way to spur the economy. We want to see the economy get going, so we'll make money really cheap so you can have plenty of it to go invest in something or start your business or build a bridge or build an office building. Right. They're trying to get people to go into debt, and people aren't really going for that. And so that's why the zero interest rate policies have largely failed. And now they're moving into negative interest rate territory. But what is the average citizen's hedge against negative interest rates? How can they fight negative interest rates? It's cash. Cash money is gives you the ability to not have a zero interest rate, a negative interest rate. Because how do they do negative interest rate? It's not like they advertise, get negative 5% on your money this month. Although who knows? It's such a crazy world. Maybe we'll see that. What they do is bank fees, right? So if you've got cash in your account, then they charge you a fee, and effectively you've got a negative interest rate at that point. So it's actually cheaper to get your money out of the bank and then go rent a safety deposit box and just put the cash in the safety deposit box. Then your fee is only like $10 a year or something.
That's not allowed anymore in a lot of banks.
And it's not safe.
Rich, we didn't talk before this, right?
No.
He's my plant. JP Morgan Chase bans storage of cash in its safety deposit boxes. So it's obvious that that people are.
It's time for mattress coin. Quick, grab the domain.
So are we heading towards a cashless one world government?
I don't know. What is that? I thought there was something I want to highlight from this one. Now this is arguably this is InfoWars, and this is they're kind of it's a bit of a dubious source. I mean, someone's saying they're getting a letter from J.P. Morgan. The contents of your box. You agree not to store any cash or coins other than those found to have a collectible value.
That would be all of them, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You collect that.
Yes, but strange days, and it's interesting that this kind of thing is possible, right? You'd think that you could put anything you want in a safety deposit box. That's really what they're for. And well, more and more the powers that be are telling us what we can and can't do, especially with our money. All right, so let's say that it's really dangerous to start walking around with cash, though. To start exercising your right to take the cash that you have rightfully earned, probably paid taxes on already, but you're more and more around the world, it's considered criminal activity to have a lot of cash, to simply have a lot of cash. In this story, again, this is a bit of a dubious source, but where there's smoke, there's fire. Feds urge banks to call cops on customers who withdraw $5,000 or more. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I do know that banks and financial institutions are required in the United States to fill out what's called a suspicious activity report, a SAR, if anyone withdraws more than $10,000 cash from their account at a time, or if you wire more than $10,000 into another bank account, or for sure out of the country. That's grounds for a, quote, suspicious activity report. And if banks don't fulfill that obligation to the U.S., I don't know who enforces that. Anyway, if they don't do that, they're subject to these huge fines, and it's a real problem. So just an example of what can happen if you choose to have cash money. Now I'm going to play this little story for you. Hopefully we got audio. This is also going on.
They told me that I was had been structuring deposits, and therefore they had seized all my assets. They seized a little over $100,000 out of my business account here, which was all that was in there. Took 13 years to get it, and less than 13 seconds, I guess, to take it away.
Lyndon McClellan is a convenience store owner in rural North Carolina, and the latest in a string of small business owners targeted for civil forfeiture under the structuring laws. These laws were intended to apply to criminals seeking to evade bank reporting requirements, but they're increasingly applied to people whose only supposed offense is doing business in cash.
This is all I've ever done. I was raised in the store business, 12, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week. To make this kind of money, selling soft drinks, cigarettes, and hot dogs, some of it's got to work. Okay, it wasn't just handed to us. It was taken from us, but it wasn't handed to us.
Civil forfeiture allowed the government to take Lyndon's money without convicting or even charging him with a crime. And now those same civil forfeiture laws mean Lyndon has to fight the government in order to get his money back.
Well, I thought, well, do you quit now? Do you try to keep struggling and go on? And I chose to try to keep going and move forward on the business. It's hard to overcome this kind of loss in today's business world.
This wasn't supposed to happen. After similar cases came to light at the end of 2014, the government changed its policies to bar seizures in these kinds of cases. But federal officials in the field are not respecting the IRS policy change.
The IRS says this is wrong, and all I want is the government to follow the new rules in this case. Nobody's above the law, and not even the federal government. If they're wrong, they're wrong. And I feel like this is wrong. That's why I'm asking for help in trying to recover my money, and anybody else that's had this to happen to them needs to do the same thing. I mean, it's not right.
So you can bet that he's hiring some really high power lawyers, right, to go get his $107,000 back. Probably not. And And what he did, if you didn't catch it, was he was structuring his deposits, is what they call it, meaning that he was making his deposits for $10,000 or less, so that the bank doesn't have to fill out these suspicious activity reports. And what in other stories that I've read, that's suspicious activity. If you're submitting deposits for $9,000, $9,500, $9,700, and you've got a string of deposits that are just below the limit, they call that structuring your deposits, and that's the grounds under which they did it. So, kind of crazy.
I mean, to a certain extent, you can. People don't mention, but you can kind of understand it, but without due process, it's not really.
Yeah, that's the key.
We've all seen Breaking Bad, right? These guys could be doing anything out in their back cupboards, But
right.
It's civil. It's civil. There is no due process, constitutional due process protection for civil enforcement actions.
That's tragic.
Yeah. That's the real bummer. And this story, moving on, I guess, is another example where there is no due process. This was an expose by the Washington Post on another instance of civil forfeiture from the police in the United States. And I'll put this link in the show notes, but this little comedy routine kind of says it better than.
Because the Washington Post recently published a major investigation featuring stories like that of this man, who was driving from Michigan to San Francisco with $2,400 in cash that his dad had lent him to start a new job when he was pulled over in Nevada.
I gave him my license and registration, and then as he was looking at that information, he asked me how much money I was traveling.
Well, he told him about the money his dad gave him, which he kept in the trunk.
He told me to turn on my air vents on high and roll up my windows and get out of the car because he was going to run a canine around me.
Dove didn't find drugs, but he did find the $2,400.
He said, no, I'm going to keep the money because I've concluded in my investigation here that you are traveling from Michigan to California to purchase drugs.
Wow. There is so much wrong there, including the fact that any policeman who genuinely believes you need to travel from Michigan to California to purchase drugs needs to be introduced to the concept of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's right there. And the problem is, stories like that are surprisingly common. In fact, since 9/11, under just one program, police have taken $2.5 billion in the course of over 61,000 seizures of cash alone from people who, and this is the mind-blowing part, were not charged with a crime. That is the sort of police behaviour that we laugh at other countries for, along with their accents and silly hats. The way civil forfeiture generally works is that if the police believe they have a preponderance of the evidence that suggests your property was or could be used in a crime, they may confiscate it. And it gets even weirder.
Many folks are unfamiliar with the idea of civil forfeiture, which is actually a case brought directly against a piece of property where you don't need to be proven guilty of a crime for your goods to be taken away.
Exactly. You don't need to be charged with a crime because it's not you that's on trial, it's your stuff. That's why these cases have historically had eye-catching names, such as, and all of these are real, United States versus $8,850 in US currency. United States versus an article consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes, more or less, each containing one pair of cracker balls. United States versus approximately 64,695 pounds of shark fins, which must have been an amazing court case. And do you see those shark fins in the room right now? Yes! There they are! There they are! Yet the record show the witness is pointed at roughly 65,000 pounds of shark fins. Guilty, guilty.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Check it out. It's a longer video than that. Very entertaining. You'll laugh if, instead of crying about this because it's kind of a sad story when you think about it. But yeah, it's again, it's kind of the war on cash. If you're traveling around with cash, they can assume that you're doing something nefarious with that cash and take it away. And unless you're willing to hire a lawyer and get your money back, then well, you're SOL. And who knows if you'll have the money back anyway. If you go back and read the Washington Post story that he invokes, there was a a Chinese man who was traveling with $74,000 in cash because he was going to go buy a restaurant, right? And, you know, I mean, Chinese, you know, Chinatown, they do things a little bit differently. They do a lot of cash business stuff. Anyway, that money was confiscated from him. He had to hire lawyers and go through due process, and it took him a year to get that money back. But obviously his deal fell through for the restaurant that he was going to buy, and just a big mess.
The real problem is there's all the incentive in the world for the police departments to do this, because the money actually stays in the jurisdiction. It goes into the county coffers.
Mm-hmm.
So literally they're enriching the local government by doing this. So there's a huge incentive for them to do it. And there's a huge disincentive for people to fight it. Because once you fight it, I mean, the way that you have to fight it is you have to prove the source of the money. You have to prove what you were doing with the money. And a lot of people really aren't interested in having their personal affairs exposed to that level of scrutiny, particularly when you're talking about $2,400.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to be able to retain an attorney for that amount of money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
There's a reason it's called highway robbery.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually it's the robbers, not the police, right?
And you know, this doesn't just apply to cash. It applies to, as he points out here, all kinds of physical assets, houses, cars, anything that can be that can be traced, quote unquote, to criminal activity. And since it's civil, the burden of proof is preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
You see, in the UK, we have the Proceeds of Crime Act, which is once you are found guilty, then your assets can be seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act, but not a moment before. You can. I've read of stories, and I know people who have been in court cases for one guy for embezzlement, and he had his big house and his Mercedes, and right up until the moment he was found guilty. And
yeah. Well, that makes sense to me. That sounds logical to me, much more logical than this. And he's right. You know what? Growing up in the United States, I always thought that kind of thing was what they did in Russia or in third world countries, and it's kind of sad to see that kind of thing happening.
In Indonesia, when they try and catch your eye and pull you over on the motorbike.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the real difference is in the States, they'll shoot you.
That's right.
That's the real difference.
And here, if you kind of don't see them, they let you go.
You can use ignorance as a weapon, right?
Yes.
What happens if you don't know or whatever? You know, if the answer
What's that?
that you're not carrying money. I mean,
Well,
is it?
I can answer that question. Never answer a question from a cop in the United States. There is no law that says you have to give them ID. You can show them your ID through the window. You do not have to answer any questions. Every time they ask you a question, you say, I do not answer any questions. Eventually they'll get tired of it, unless they're going to write you a ticket, in which case you have to sign it and take it. You do not have to answer any questions. As soon as you do, that's the kind of stuff that happens.
In the video that you saw where they brought in the canine, canines are trained to detect not simply drugs, they're also trained to detect money.
That's right.
And all the money's got cocaine on it anyway, so it all smells like cocaine, so they can find all the money anyway.
Well, with dog training, you've got some dogs that are trained to smell drugs and some dogs that are trained to smell money.
Yeah.
So they're different dogs.
Yeah. In Washington State, they had to get rid of their dogs. The state control had to get rid of the dogs because marijuana is now legal there. I bet the dogs were trained to smell marijuana. So they were going to start getting false indications. So they got a whole new group of dogs up there now.
Oh, really?
Early retirement.
Yeah.
Canine obsolescence.
Maybe they can help other people find marijuana. That sounds interesting. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's also the war on cash in another respect, and that is a war on savers. And you're starting to see headlines like this. Reserve Bank of Australia cuts official cash rate, record low 2% at May meeting. So you've got central banks around the world cutting interest rates to zero or near zero, certainly the lowest they've ever been. This is, well, every central bank around the world has two levers of power at their control that they can use to try and spur economic activity. One is printing money, the other is controlling the overnight interest rate. And you can only control the interest rate if you control the money supply. And when you control the interest rate, then the interest rate is no longer representative of the risk of any given investment, right? The market signals that interest rates usually give the world are no longer valid because these huge players are manipulating, in effect, the interest rate. So interest rates affect everything on planet Earth. The States Federal Reserve has held these 2000, and so we've had 5 years of, I mean, you really don't, if you can imagine, you've got a $1 house, what's the real value of that house if interest rates go up to 18% when, like they did back in the 80s? The price of the house is going to be different, right? Because if you've got people borrowing money to buy that house, it now becomes much, much more expensive for them to get that loan. And that affects the pricing of houses. So there's that. There's also, when these interest rates are held artificially low, it forces people who are on a fixed income or people who are retired and have their nest egg to constantly look for places to put their money, because the money that they got in their savings account no interest, right? So if there's any inflation at all, then they're losing money. You know, my mom is retired, and I've worked with her, and she needs to make 3% on her money in order for her money to last till the end of her life. And she's worried about making 3%. It's hard to safely make 3% in the United States these days. And well, if you can imagine how much money is foregone, some would say taken from people because the interest rates have been zero instead of what they would otherwise normally be, all that interest that my mother would have earned is not there. It's been used to try and stimulate the economy, but arguably that has not worked. So there's really a war against savers as well. Here's another instance, and you know, really, why is there a war against savers? Because essentially, there's a lot of broke governments out there, and we've talked a lot about Greece. Here, Greece is looking for another way to tax its citizens. You know, Greece perennially has problems collecting tax. Right? There's a lot of people who run cash businesses in Greece, and people don't comply, and the government is kind of bare bones anyway because their budgets have been slashed. And so this is one of their proposed remedies. Greece introduces cash point, which is an ATM tax, in desperate bid to raise revenue and stop run on banks as country teeters on the brink of bankruptcy. I don't know if you guys caught it this week in our Facebook group. We had one of the people who used to come every week is now in Greece. He took some pictures of the lines at the Greek ATMs.
Really,
So,
as of last week.
Yes. Yes.
Because I know they've got like a week's worth of cash, haven't they?
Yeah, but they've still, I don't know if they've got capital controls in place yet, but a few weeks ago we looked at a graph that showed the capital outflows in Greece, and you can see that people have been pulling their money out, putting their money in banks outside of Greece, and in anticipation of some sort of capital controls or Greek default. So can't even get money out without paying.
There we go.
This was also posted in the group. I think, Richard, it was you who first told me about this one. France is, you know, we had that Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack that happened. And it was determined that those terrorists had cash, like when they raided their apartment or something. And so now they're introducing this legislation in France where basically if you're a French citizen, I think you can't pay cash for anything over $1,000. So that guy who had $2,400 to go buy a car, like that would be illegal in France, I guess. If you showed up with 2,400 euro in your pocket, you couldn't perform that transaction for a car or anything else for that matter.
It's so silly. It's hardly like that cash that those guys had was going to be used at like I don't know, a Walmart or something, right? It was probably going to be used for something illicit.
Yeah.
And the guys would say, sorry, I can't sell you this bag of guns, you know, because we've got a €1,000 limit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is well, this is a broader topic. I mean, and you raise a good point. Regulations, in most cases, don't work. There's all this talk about more regulation that's needed in order to avert the next global financial crisis. But we had lots of regulations in 2008, and it didn't keep anything from happening. So, and your point is well taken. Even if we had that limit, it's not going to stop the backroom deal from happening. So anyway, there are some other rules in there. I encourage you to take a look. This is from Reuters. So assume it's true that those things will go into effect in September of this year. All these cash controls. And then there's Bitcoin. And I thought I'd pull this up. I don't know if you guys are aware, but it makes me wonder. Is Bitcoin a part of this war on cash? We've got this mysterious founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. He created this incredible software that is really elegantly made. I mean, the guy was a genius. Some people postulate that Bitcoin was invented by the CIA. It's part of some master plan to get us off of cash. And this is just part of the game plan. And Bitcoin is traceable. It is not cash. If you want to buy drugs, use Bitcoin at your peril, because it's not good for that. It is entirely traceable. So I don't know. It's something to think about. I don't actually believe that. I think Bitcoin takes away levers of power from central banks and governments that they would never forego willingly. They would never trade that for the ability to track people's financial transactions, in my opinion. But to think about.
Unless it's a case of if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the possibility there.
I think it's good to think about these things, think critically, even about Bitcoin. I'm a big cheerleader for Bitcoin, but I've got to remind myself to think critically about it and just ask questions. Maybe we'll move on to Dash, huh? But anyway, I thought I'd bring up this bitaddress.org and remind people that with Bitcoin, you can print your own cash. Are you guys aware of this?
Yeah.
Bitcoin, at its heart, is only two numbers. You've got the address, which everybody knows. You need that in order to send Bitcoins to somebody. And then you've got the key, which is the second number. You keep that number secret. And that's all you need to store value in Bitcoin. You don't need anything beyond that in order to store Bitcoin value. So you can go to this bitaddress.org and you can create your own money, right? You can turn on your own printing presses. You can be your own Federal Reserve. You can send Bitcoins to all these addresses, print these out and throw them in your safe. And actually, you can do this without any of these private keys ever being online at any time ever. You can create this money on a computer that's not connected to the internet and print your own Bitcoin dollar bills and throw them in your safe, which is really interesting when you think about it. If we were to obscure this, maybe put like a hologram sticker over the private key and show some sort of tamper-resistant sticker where, if somebody were handed a note, they could see if someone had exposed the private key. If you could basically see if a bill hadn't been tampered with, you could actually circulate that money just like the money we use every day. You could go on.
Could be verified by the public.
Right. You could go on the blockchain and see, okay, this has still got 10 Bitcoins associated with it, and I can see no one has pulled the sticker off, so I can go and spend this just like cash. So it's kind of an interesting thought experiment. Could the internet go away? And if I had 1,000 of these things, could we keep things going in Ubud even though there was no internet, or some sort of global catastrophe where we can't communicate anymore?
But if you're walking through the airport with 10,000 US, like if you took 10,000 US dollars and put it onto one of those and put that in your wallet and walk through the airport.
Are you breaking the law?
It's when you get caught. That's a question for
Yeah,
so,
I don't know.
So yeah, that's.
Would they make you unlock it?
That's an interesting proposal. They could scan it too and see what value.
They could pull the sticker off and confiscate it, take it for themselves.
But they're not going to find that you're hiding it on your person.
Well, for me, it's on an encrypted drive, so it's a totally safe option. But if I were to do it.
As long as it's a necessary.
Okay, well, we are right against the hour. I know a lot of you are really anxious to get over to Pechakucha Night at Beetle Nut. Are there any, did I miss anything? Are there any questions, anything people want to bring up?
Well, I did actually want to say something. The other day we mentioned the Bitcoin Investment Trust, which is a derivative of Bitcoin. It's currently still trading at around $500 a Bitcoin.
Yeah, I saw that. It's up like 20%, right?
Yeah.
So just to remind you guys, there's a derivative of Bitcoin. It's shares, that each share is supposed to represent 1/10 of a Bitcoin. And it's trading at $49, something like that, which would make the Bitcoins worth close to $500. Scratching my head on that one. I don't know.
What's it called? Bitcoin Investment Trust.
It's the over-the-counter.
Yeah.
Yes. So presumably there's a bunch of housewives in the outskirts of New York City who don't want to fire up their computer and have Bitcoins themselves. They'd rather hold these shares that are trading at a 200% premium to the actual Bitcoin price.
So
Who's buying these things? I do not know.
what does a share look like versus a Bitcoin?
What does it look like?
Probably like
It's just
a
it's just like a, I don't know what does a share look like. I don't know. It's just a representation. It's a legal construct, a fictitious thing. All right, we're gonna leave it there, guys. And thanks for coming. Like I mentioned, please join the Bitcoins in Bali group. Where is that? And post your stuff about Bitcoin, and come join us in person next Tuesday night, same time, same station. Thanks, guys.
Can I say something?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing a talk tomorrow at Dragonfly at 10 o'clock. It's about money. It's about the history of, or the secret history of money. You probably know it pretty much, and it sort of winds up talking about Bitcoin, but the talk goes from